That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about American Fiction, the directorial debut of Cord Jefferson, which premiered at the 2023 Toronto International Film Festival, where it won the People's Choice Awards. It is being released courtesy of MGM and Orion Pictures on December 22nd, 2023.
Directorial debut. But this person has written
For a lot of television, like on Watchmen, I believe, and Station 11 recently.
the premise. A novelist who's fed up with the establishment profiting from black entertainment uses a pen name to write a book that propels him to the heart of hypocrisy and the madness he claims to disdain. What is your pull quote?
A bold, shrewd parody of white America's eternal compulsion for conserving and rewarding black stereotypes, Cord Jefferson's debut is also simultaneously a poignant exploration of bittersweet familial tendencies led by a frustrating but enthralling Jeffrey Wright.
Mine, funny, smart, and heartfelt, American Fiction gives everything I need in a melodrama. I really enjoyed this movie.
It owes a lot, and I saw this at the AFI Film Festival just last month, where Jefferson referenced Robert Townsend's 1987 film Hollywood Shuffle, which it does owe a lot to that film.
So the story, the novelist is played by Jeffrey Wright. He is an accomplished writer and a tenured professor at a college. And we see the opening of the film is him teaching a class on, I want to get this right, literature of the American South. And a student named Brittany, who is not black, is very offended by the use of the N-word because Jeffrey Wright's character has written it on the whiteboard in relation to like a quote.
It's the title of a story by Flannery O'Connor.
And he's frustrated with her, and so she goes and complains. The head of the college calls him in with some other faculty. They also explain that, not only did you offend this student, but prior to that, he had offended a German student by asking if his family were Nazis. So they tell him, you need to take a break. So he's in Los Angeles. He flies back east to Massachusetts to be with his mom and sister. His mom is played by Leslie Uggams, and his sister is played by Tracee Ellis Ross. And the two of them live together because the mother is starting to perhaps see the effects of Alzheimer's.
I don't know that Tracee Ellis lives there because Lorraine asks her how she's doing when they show up.
Oh, I thought she said she did have to live with her.
No, I think she's tired of trying to do everything that Leslie Uggams needs.
Well, either way, they're an affluent family. Tracee Ellis Ross is a medical doctor. The mother, at her home, she has a housekeeper who's important to the story too. But Jeffrey Wright shows up, and it's clear that he really loves his mom and sister, but he's always been very distant from them. He also has another brother played by Sterling K. Brown, who lives in Arizona.
Tucson.
So Jeffrey Wright and Tracee Ellis Ross are, hanging out. They're having lunch, and all of a sudden, Tracee Ellis Ross dies from what appears to be a heart attack. So now Jeffrey Wright's responsible for his mother. Thankfully, he's on sabbatical. And the bulk of the movie is him trying to figure out what to do with his mother because she needs, nursing home care. Jeffrey doesn't have any money. His brother, Sterling K. Brown, who is also a medical doctor, recently got divorced and came out as gay. He's claiming he doesn't have any money. And Jeffrey Wright's agent is telling him, I'm having a really hard time selling your book because publishers want something that's a little more black.
Yes, his latest book is a reworking of Aeschylus's The Persians, which is the only surviving part of a trilogy by Aeschylus.
In juxtaposition, we have the character Issa Rae, who's also an author, and she's written a book called Weeze Lives in Da Ghetto, which is a runaway hit. And Jeffrey Wright can't stand her. He thinks her writing is regressive, or reductive. So while all this is happening, Jeffrey's also been invited to be part of the jury of a prestigious literary award. So a lot of things are happening. He's trying to find nursing care for his mom. He's dealing with his agent who can't sell his book. He has started a romance with the neighbor across the street from his mother's or his family's beach home, played by Erika Alexander.
Coraline.
And then he's also dealing with being on this jury when all of a sudden he has the bright idea kind of in an act of he's trying to act out. He writes a book under a pseudonym or a pen name.
Yeah.
The name of which I can't remember.
Stag R. Lee.
That's right.
Stagger Lee is actually an old folk song as well.
Oh. Mm-hmm. And Stagger Lee's supposed to be a convict on the run, like a real person, but he wants to be he wants his identity masked because he's a fugitive. And he writes a book called My Pathology. Mm-hmm. So instead of TH, it's F. And this book is his attempt at writing something more black. And his agent is like, "Chow, everyone wants this book. I can get you $750,000 in advance. And there's a Hollywood filmmaker played by Adam Brody who wants to buy the rights to make a movie for $4 million. So now Jeffrey Wright's doing this book tour, trying to mask his identity. He's dealing with his girlfriend / neighbor, Erika Alexander. Jeffrey Wright's not in a good place, so he's kind of an asshole. Yeah. He's on this jury, and he decides to rename his book from My Pathology to the F word, mm-hmm. F-U-C-K.
Kind of challenging these white publishers from backing off, because a part of him really doesn't want this published.
No. And what do the publishers say? We love it. And of course, the book is a hit. And the jury decide to enter the book into the contest. And the book, F-U-C-K, wins the top prize.
And it's 3 white authors and 2 blacks, Sintara.
On the jury. Yeah. And one of whom is Issa Rae. So the end of the movie is him at the awards ceremony. And of course, as the audience, we're like, well, who's going to accept this award? So this is when the movie sort of switches to being maybe the hour and a half we just watched was the movie about this character. So we see him with Adam Brody trying to decide how the film should end. And we have several alternate endings, but the one that we stick with, the one that Adam Brody likes, is that Jeffrey Wright goes up to accept the award and he's going to say actually it's me. But then the FBI busts in thinking that he's this fugitive, shoot and kill him, the end. And then the final scene is Jeffrey leaving the soundstage of the movie they shot, getting in a car with his brother, Sterling K. Brown, and they ride off into the sunset. There's a lot going on. I still didn't mention a few things, but this to me felt like a very elevated, and I hate to even use this as a reference, so maybe I won't, but there's a very popular filmmaker black filmmaker who's known for melodrama, who just had a documentary released on Amazon Prime.
You can say it. He's brought up twice in this movie.
Well, that's true. So this felt like if Tyler Perry were a better writer and a better filmmaker, maybe he could make a movie like this. And I really connected with the story. I really related to a lot of it. Mm-hmm. It's just very smart and funny.
It is. As I said, it owes a lot to Hollywood Shuffle, which this would make a fantastic double feature with. It also reminded me in this literary world that it's taking aim at, reminded me of this recent Olivier Assayas film called Nonfiction, which is all about these authors trying to navigate this kind of crumbling industry and people grasping at straws to stay relevant.
I mean, where to begin? The cast. You have Tracee Ellis Ross, Jeffrey Wright, Erika Alexander, Leslie Uggams, Sterling K. Brown. I mean...
Keith David.
Oh my gosh.
He's in one scene.
But you love Keith David. I mean, it's just such a strong cast and everyone does such a good job.
It's such a good cast. And I think that these characters are all given kind of a background to which makes them seem familiar and relatable, and with all the baggage that comes with being part of a family that you don't get along with, that you believe that they're siblings. I don't know. It's very warm, and I think has some really great bits of dialogue.
There's a scene where Jeffrey Wright's character goes to the bookstore and he asks the little bookstore worker, Ned, "Are you familiar with this author?" Him. But of course, this bookstore worker doesn't know what the author looks like. So he looks it up on his little machine and says, "Oh yeah, right over here in the African American literature section." And Jeffrey Wright gets upset, there's nothing black about this book except the author and the ink printed on the page. So he grabs all his books and tries to move them to a different section. And that's when he sees Issa Rae's book on its own stand, an end cap, because her book's a runaway hit. And of course, he's very frustrated. Then his sister, Tracee Ellis Ross, walks in and she's like, not again. Like, put them books down. I thought that was such a good scene.
It's actually, it feels like a gut punch when she dies because she's such a great character.
Well, just anytime I see her in anything, I just really like her. And she's so good in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
We find out that the dad died by killing himself at the beach house.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I thought, a really nice... I mean, this family has experienced quite a bit of trauma, but the way it's handled is very subtle. Because, we have Sterling K. Brown, who's just divorced his wife after he's come out as gay. He appears to have not only financial issues, but maybe a drug problem.
He's making up for lost time.
Time. We see that Tracee Ellis Ross's character, while she's also a medical doctor, she's struggling financially because she recently had a divorce and still has to pay all this money. So I think it's like I like how it's all handled.
Well, I like how it navigates the different attachment styles that each of these siblings has towards the parents.
Yes.
Well, because the dad's dead clearly for several years, but we learned that Thelonious, Monk, as they call Jeffrey Wright's character, was closest to him. He was kind of the golden child and considered a genius by the parents, and that also isolated him from his siblings, who received kind of a different treatment from the parents. And I think one of the best scenes that feels so real is Leslie Uggams. Agnes is her character. The dementia has taken hold and she's kind of slipping quickly, and she is in an assisted living facility, and Sterling K. Brown, Clifford, shows up, and they have this really nice moment where they dance together in her room, and she says, I knew you were never one of those homos, and he shuts down.
That was a really good scene.
It's so good. It felt very real.
Another good scene is Tracee Ellis Ross's funeral. They take her ashes, the family, so it's only like 4 people. They take her ashes to the beach house, which appears to be like an exclusive private stretch of the coast. And they dump her ashes into the beach. And then their white neighbor, Philip, walks by and interrupts them. Like, do you have a permit to do that? And Sterling K. Brown cusses his ass out and like runs him off. I thought that was... Like, the humor is handled in a very real way.
Yeah.
It's very effective.
I think Sterling K. Brown steals all of his scenes. And, he's played a similar character to this very recently with Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, which is a film I liked as well, but not as much as this. And he's just very good at navigating a character that could have been a caricature very easily.
I really like Jeffrey Wright's beard. He has a very nice beard, so I had to say that.
And I mean, he's always good. From Angels in America to Basquiat to every time you see him. Except for maybe Asteroid City, which wasn't his fault.
He makes a comment about Black Stories Month and saying how really only like what they want is like gang violence, slavery, and crackheads. So that's what my pathology is. Like he basically takes all those stereotypical tropes and creates a story. But what's interesting is we get an excerpt from his book, My Pathology, which then turns into F-U-C-K. And that's where we see Keith David. Because as Jeffrey Wright's writing the words, we see Keith David and another actor, his son, playing out the words. And I thought that was so effective.
It's funny these publishers are so hungry for this kind of, stereotypical representation. But there's a whole history of urban literature. I mean, it's funny that Donald Goines his name never comes up in this, because that's really what my pathology, especially as we see Keith David showing up as he's writing this character. It feels like a Donald Goines novel.
Probably my only negative about the movie is I didn't care for the soundtrack.
It didn't bother me.
It could have been better.
I think we need to talk for a minute too about Sintara Golden, the Issa Rae character, because she reads an excerpt at a book reading, which is so ridiculous and laughable, and as compared to the bit we get of My Pathology, it's not played for comedy, which is the thing. But Sintara Golden's character is really a modern day Zora Neale Hurston, writing in that vernacular, and I think it's interesting to draw some comparisons to how Hurston was demeaned when she was alive for writing in this vernacular. And this protagonist is really doing the same thing to her. And I think one of the most compelling sequences is when those two are alone on the book jury speaking, and he confronts her about and she doesn't like F-U-C-K. She says it's pandering. And he agrees because he wrote it to be so, but he's like, how is this different from yours? And I think they have a really interesting conversation.
They do.
Which yields one of the film's best quotes, which I know you wrote down.
So he basically says that he doesn't like it because there's so much more potential in the writers who write prose like she did. And Issa Rae says potential is what people say when what they see in front of them is not good enough, which stops Jeffrey Wright's character in his tracks. Like, he has to really think about it. He is pretentious. He's
frustrating.
He's very frustrating. He seems incapable of seeing outside of his own sort of worldview. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I really like the Issa Rae character.
I did too, and
I will say another thing I didn't fully understand is how she felt like her book was different from his.
Well, because she said, I'm fine with giving the market what it wants, and he's like, well, that's a drug dealer, and she says, well, I believe drugs should be legal as well. But yeah, he has ostensibly written something that the market craves, and I think his agent, who's played by John Ortiz, who I love all of his scenes too, and has that nice whiskey reference that he brings out. Like, you write blue label books, but you could write a red label. You can do both.
Well, that analogy is that because Jeffrey Wright's trying to say that he's above writing the kind of stories that would actually sell, and then the agent brings out 3 bottles of Johnny Walker, red, blue, and black, and he's explaining like, that obviously like red is the cheapest and black is the best, most expensive, but the one maker does them all, and people accept that. So I thought that was very effective.
Mm-hmm. And most of the white people are kind of played a little caricature, with the exception of Adam Brody, who I think has a little more dimension than that. But I don't know. I really like when Jeffrey Wright, because he doesn't think this is going to take off. He writes this as a joke, and these publishers jump on it, and then John Ortiz is the one that says, oh yeah, the author you can't see him because he's a fugitive from the law. And when Jeffrey Wright has to don kind of this, like they want him to act hood, and I think all of those scenes are comedy gold.
Yeah, yeah. So the Jeffrey Wright dating Erika Alexander, when he first brings her home to meet the mom tells Erika, I'm happy you're not white. And Erika says, me too. But then we find out that Jeffrey Wright's previous girlfriend was white.
And so is Sterling K. Brown's beard wife. There's some interesting dynamics going on there as well. But Erika Alexander is, as usual, such a breath of fresh air, because she's a public defender, and she has a really good line in their first interaction where they're talking about the comparisons between an author and a public defender, and having to kind of approach people with a certain kindness and not judging them, because she says people are more than their worst deed.
And then Sterling K. Brown asks her, why do you like my brother? Like, what do you see in my brother? And she says he's funny, but not like funny, haha, more like funny like a 3-legged dog. And like, that's what Sterling K. Brown says, or like someone who died on the toilet. I thought that was funny. So the housekeeper, I think is pretty integral to the story, because she kind of represents like, they keep saying she's family. Mm-hmm. But then once the mother gets transferred to a nursing home, there's this question of like,
what do you do with her?
What would they do with her? But we never get the chance to see what they would do with her, they being Jeffrey Wright, because she ends up dating like a security guard, and then they get married. And I thought that was very interesting, because I would have been very curious to know what Jeffrey would have done with her. Like, would he have treated her like, like a lot of white families will have like, their Mexican nanny who raises their children, and then they can get rid of that nanny like they're nothing, mm-hmm. but call them family for 15 years. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that in this story, they didn't allow us to see what would have happened, which I think was smart.
Well, the book deal also allows him to pay for a nice, expensive room for his mother, and also kind of keep Lorraine on for longer. And she's played by Myra Lucretia Taylor, who's in all kinds of stuff.
I liked her.
I did too, but there's one moment that is so telling about what he really thinks about her, because she's announced she's going to marry Maynard, and she's packing up her stuff to leave the family house, and he says, "Oh, you forgot something."
Her apron.
Her maid's apron. And she goes, "Oh, no, I don't want that."
She's like, "I never liked that." Yeah, and it's like, why would you think...
Why would
That's why, I mean, I do think it's very well handled that I suspect that Jeffrey Wright probably wouldn't have treated her like family, but luckily she was able to move on. And we don't get a lot of backstory on her. Like, maybe she didn't need their help. Maybe she had saved up or she had children who made sure she was good, but...
Well, she's clearly attached to Agnes because there's a scene when they're first moving into the nursing home where an orderly brings in Agnes's lunch, and it's a sandwich without the bread, the crust cut off, and Lucretia lays into him. Lorraine basically demeans him. "Don't ever let this happen again. We pay enough here. This isn't how she likes her lunch." So clearly she has, a relationship to this woman.
Issa Rae's character is reading a book called White Negroes. I thought that was funny.
Because we hover on that too, because Jeffrey Wright looks at it
then Issa Rae and Jeffrey Wright, who are on the jury, so it's 5 people, 3 white people, then the 2 black people, and they do not want FUCK to win the award. But they're like, it's 3 against 2, so it's winning. And then the white lady says, well, it's essential to listen to black voices.
Right now.
Which, of course, the irony is that they're not listening to the 2 black.
Because we hover on that for a second. She's played by Jen Harris, who's quite funny, I think, too.
I thought all the moments with the jury, because they're kind of talking like it's like split screen, or because they're not in the same room for a lot of it, was all very well done.
And she's from the movie Gaby, if you remember that.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Then the movie that Adam Brody ends up making, or no, the movie he's making while he's talking to Jeffrey Wright about his movie is called Plantation Annihilation.
Which is about a white couple that moves into this plantation and they're killed by the ghosts of old slaves. I was, just right before we started this, I wonder if that's supposed to be a reference to Jason Blum, who, of course, produced Get Out.
And then speaking of Tyler Perry, they do mention that there's Sterling K. Brown asks, who's going to play me in the movie? And he's the gay character. And they say Tyler Perry.
But the first reference is, it's kind of the first time, it's after Tracee Ellis Ross dies and the brothers are drinking and having kind of their first solo conversation together. And this is how I can tell this is this is based on a book as well by Percival Everett called Erasure. But you can tell the note about Sterling K. Brown living in Tucson. He's like, there's only one gay bar, it's for college kids, and I was mistaken for Tyler Perry. And it's true, I've been to Tucson. That's apt.
What would you give this movie?
I would give it 3.5.
I think I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. I thought it was excellent. If I'm looking at it like good melodrama, it just felt very elevated.
I agree.
Yeah. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.